Hi, everyone. It's Harvey, the Education Manager here at the Augusta Museum of History. We have a great lecture today about women in the arts, but of course, before we get started, let's look ahead to the next few weeks in the calendar. First up, we have Juneteenth. That is June 19th, just in a couple of weeks. Bring your whole family. It's going to be a fun, family-friendly event where we celebrate the ending of slavery in the United States, so come out and learn with us. In July, the first week in July, we are having our first ever, our inaugural Great Building Showdown. We've got some incredible artists who've made Lego structures of some historic buildings in the CSRA, and they are just beautiful. So make sure you come out and see that. It is free in the Rotunda. They will be on auction, and you can vote for your favorite as well. All right, today we have Miss Brenda Durant talking to us about some of her favorite women artists in the area, some of the most influential people to her in her life, artists in the area. So here's a little bit about her. Miss Brenda Durant has been the executive director of the Greater Augusta Arts Council for over 20 years. Under her leadership, the Arts in the Heart Augusta Festival grew from a small local festival to an event welcoming over 80,000 visitors downtown each September. I know some of you have been. It is a great event. She's also the Arts Weekly radio show host, which is broadcast on Saturday mornings on Smooth Jazz 92.3 FM, or you can listen to it via podcast on AugustaArts.com. She's a graduate of the Augusta State University and is married to Ed Durant. They have 3 wonderful, beautiful children together. Thank you so much, Brenda, for doing this lecture for us. Everyone enjoy.
Thank you all for having me today. I was so pleased to get a call from Nancy Glazier asking me to give a talk on female artists in Augusta. I know I've gone back and forth about what my title is, but I started by just thinking about artists that had an impact on me or on our community that I interacted with in the past over 20 years I've been with the Greater Augusta Arts Council. And then I realized there were 2 women that I really wanted to acknowledge and thank as I thought about the impact of arts in Augusta. And one is the woman who donated the Gertrude Herbert Institute of Art and started given a stable venue to the arts community. So if you can picture Augusta in the 1930s, we had a strong contingent that came to town in September and stayed in Augusta through May, our winter colony, people who like the climate here. And Augusta at that point did not have a central venue or organization for the arts. And so some women started to meet at their homes and getting together to work on the cultural life of Augusta, as there was no permanent home. And they started the Augusta Art Club. So there was no place for them to meet, but they borrowed some studio space, and they couldn't afford an instructor, but they would chip in on a model, and then they would critique each other's work. And then the art club started having these events, which I really thought, oh wow, the Greater Augusta Arts Council should just duplicate what the art club did in the 1930s, because they'd get together and have these events, and they would create these art tableaus. And sometimes you see them on Facebook where people get together and replicate a famous painting. And so they would have these events, and they would get together and replicate a famous painting. And they also had lectures, and they started informal, and then they started borrowing slides, from museums. And one of the members of the art club would, I guess, bone up on the information, and she would lead the discussion. So the members attended free. Their dues were a whopping $2 a year. And then guests who were not members of the art club could come for 50 cents to attend these lectures. And one of the winter residents who was part of the art club was Mrs. John W. Herbert. And Mrs. Herbert was a philanthropist. She came from a family that, lived in New York City and had multiple homes. And again, Augusta was her winter home. The Herberts had 3 children, John Oliver, Gertrude, and John Wayne. See where I'm going here. And they split their time between homes in Helmetta, New York City, and Augusta. And they were considered one of our earliest winter residents. And they lived in the Somerville area. And she was involved in the Augusta Art Club. Mrs. Herbert's name was Etta. Well, her daughter Gertrude, who was born in 1893, attended Baldwin School in Bryn Mawr, Penn, and the Finch School in New York City, and went to a school in Switzerland. In 1919, she married Edward Delaney Dunn, but when she wrote articles and was published, she published under her maiden name, Herbert. The Dunns, had 4 children, and Gertrude was a playwright and wrote many magazine articles. She died in June of 1933 at 40 years old, and her mother bought, renovated, and donated the building that is now called the Gertrude Herbert Institute of Art. So for that, I say thank you to Mrs. Herbert. The second person I thought about who had a big impact on the arts community, and I didn't actually meet, is Emily Remington. So Miss Remington just died July of 2020, 24 days short of her 104th birthday. So Mrs. Remington lived most of her life in South Carolina, very centered on Charleston, but she did live in Augusta in the early 50s. She came to her husband, she traveled with her husband. When she was in Augusta, she was the organist and choir master at the Lutheran Church of the Resurrection, and she was the founder of the Augusta Choral Society in 1951. She taught at Payne College and Augusta College, and was also the founding member of the Augusta chapter of the American Guild of Organists, and served as a Georgia State chairman. So I thank you to Emily Remington. And just to bring the circle close, because in Augusta, you know, we're always just a degree or two separated. My brother is the executive chef at a retirement community in Charleston called Frankie by Seaside. Emily Remington moved to Frankie a few years before she died, and my brother Frankie met her and listened to many of her stories. And so I have a brother degree of separation from Emily Remington. So I thank both Emily and Mrs. Herbert for what they did to really get to be at the start of the splendid Augusta arts community. So I moved to Augusta in November of 1972. I was a senior at Aquinas High School. I joined the class right after Thanksgiving. My mother and father had moved to Augusta already, and they said, when you come to visit us during Thanksgiving, you're not going back. So that's my story of how I came to Augusta. One of the members of my graduating class was Karen Brown. I remember seeing her in classes, gorgeous, tall, giant afro, beautiful woman. And Karen had studied ballet with the Augusta Ballet Company. And when she graduated, she went off to dance with the Dance Theater of Harlem. In the mid-2000s, time is so fluid, I did work with Drew Dawson with Georgia Public Radio on a series we did where we interviewed people who had left Augusta, became famous, and returned to give back to their community. And one of the artists that I interviewed was Karen, because Karen has always come back. In fact, this summer, she's doing a free camp for kids at the Sand Hills Community Center. And so she has never left Augusta completely behind, and when she returns, either between jobs or summer breaks or holiday breaks, she will give back to the community by teaching camps, doing classes, doing evaluations, and really trying to work hard to bring our dance community to the next level, the same privilege that she had as a girl. So that is Karen, and she is here in Augusta this summer. The second person who had a giant influence on me, of course, was Jessie Norman, and Jessie Norman was the second person I interviewed for the series with NPR. So Jessie grew up in segregated Augusta, didn't really realize as a child that it was segregated, because wherever you live is how it's supposed to be, you know, just the way your family dinners are the norm, till you go to someone else's house and realize they pass the kitchen towel around instead of using napkins, and then you realize that one of us is different. You're not quite sure who. So Jessie grew up in Augusta, sang with her church, and went off to become an internationally known opera singer. But Jessie always came back and performed in town. She performed with the symphony. She fell in love with the after-school school that soon became the Jessie Norman School for the Arts, and she visited the children, donated, raised money from her influential New York friends for the school, and she will be missed. So Jessie Norman was another artist who grew to fame and fortune and did not forget Augusta, Georgia, and did not leave us behind. And for that, I thank Jessie. One of the early people I met too when I moved to Augusta was Zan Colton. So Zan grew up in Augusta, took classes, ballet classes, and when Ron Colton opened his school, started taking classes with Ron. She did leave Augusta and dance in New York. Certain ballets were choreographed for her, but when I came back to town, she was dancing back with the Augusta Ballet and teaching classes. And I remember waiting for my sister Joyce as she was taking classes as a high school student from Zan. And Zan had a charismatic personality. You wanted to do anything for Zan. So when she said that she needed some parents to help make the kids up, put on makeup on children for the Nutcracker, I quickly signed up, and I recruited 2 friends to work with me. Kathy King, who was a local artist, and Dot Scharf, who was a performer. She performed in Augusta Players and Fort Gordon Dinner Theater shows. And the 3 of us got together, and Kathy King, the artist, redesigned the makeup. We ordered professional makeup for the first time. They'd been using a hodgepodge of, Maybelline and Revlon. And then we were put up in the deluxe penthouse above the Imperial Theater, the old Western Union office, which was in terrible shape, but we made it home. And so for the weekends of the Nutcracker, Dot, Kathy, and I set up an assembly line of doing makeup. And so we had mothers, we would just have kids lined up for having one thing done. And they would assembly line through. We learned the musical cues, so we knew when to send the kids down the stairs. And so I met both an artist, Kathy King, and Dot Scharf doing that. But also one of the mothers was Debbie Ballas. And I can remember Debbie and I working together. She would bring a coffee pot, I would probably bring a couple beers. And when we sent the angels down on the stage, our work was done. And we would celebrate with a cup of coffee or maybe something stronger at the end of each show. So as Debbie and I talked, I finally said to her one day, "So Debbie, what do you do?" And Debbie said to me, "I'm a singer." And I had to kind of think about that, what she was saying, although growing up on Long Island, I could quickly translate it. And Debbie, a few years later, went on. I joined the Arts Council in '97. I think she became the director of the Augusta Players maybe in '98. And she came on to be the executive director of the Augusta Players and brought them out of, I won't say small town, because I don't want to offend anybody, but she brought a local community theater into a Broadway-style community theater. And so she had big ideas, and she's a person who people, again, want to work with, and she would gather this team, and the Augusta Players just really grew under her love and care. And so Debbie Ballas, who was excellent at putting eyeliner on Nutcracker children, also was the future director of the Augusta Players. And so I didn't want to forget Debbie, who I met making the kids up for the Nutcracker. So another artist I met and we debate this sometimes, 1999, 2000, is Rian Swain. Rian owns a marketing and public relations company in town, and Rian is an artist. She's a gifted writer. And I've learned from people I've met since 1998 to look at the full 360 of a person, because they're not always just their day job, what they do between 9 and 5. And so Rian is an incredible painter. She does every design since 2000 or 2001 for the Arts and the Heart Festival. She also paints portraits for local organizations when they didn't need portraits painted. And she writes and edits, but she can also write a mean press release. She keeps our social media going. She redesigns our websites, and she's an all-around fun person. And so, sometimes people will talk about artists as if they have a job that pays them 9 to 5 for doing what they're doing as an artist. That's not their art part. It's only what happens out of those 9 to 5 hours. And I just don't think that's true. I think that everything she touches with an artist's eye and an artist's hand. Kathy Engler, who most of Augusta knows as Kath Girdler Engler, is another friend of mine who's an artist. I know 2 artists who were nurses, kind of went to nursing school because their parents told them that you needed something to lean back on and ensure you had money from. You couldn't take the risk of being an artist. And so as soon as they could, they left nursing, and Kathy did, and went into full-time art as a sculptor and a painter. And so if you don't know Kathy, but you know Augusta, If you've ever gone to the Maxwell Theater on the Somerville campus of Augusta University, she did the sculpture of the Three Muses. That's the water feature in front of that. So yes, you do know Kath Engler, and we recently named our Public Art Award after her. But Kath was so fun. So she was an artist and gifted, and her sculptures were amazing. But then she also believed in health and being healthy. And for a while, she was my personal trainer, and I would take exercise classes for her before I went to work in the morning. And she would do camps for kids, and it would be called like Run with the Arts. And they would paint and draw and run and exercise and lose weight and eat healthily. And she was the kind of person that when she entered a room, you knew you were in the right place. Like you almost, she died a few years ago, but I still to this day almost look at the door when I'm someplace fun, hoping that Kath is going to walk in, because she always made the event a little bit better by her presence. Person I met very recently was Cheryl Goslicker. You may know that the Billy Morris endowed a chair at Augusta University for an eminent scholar, and there's been a number of them who come and go over the years. Cheryl Goslicker came, she had a career in education, and she just retired before she came to Augusta. She lived in Athens with her husband, Larry Millard. And Cheryl really believed in kind of breaking down the walls that surround a university. A lot of times when you get involved in something like a university, or you work in a hospital, or even at a mall, it becomes your life where you don't really experience much outside of it. But Cheryl really took her role seriously as eminent scholar and brought people from the outside in to lecture and give talks. She reached across, what would you say, she reached down Walton Way to the medical community at Augusta University. She did cross talks, or sometimes they'd meet on the Somerville campus and sometimes they'd meet at the medical campus. And one of the early talks I went to was like a Da Vinci theme, where the medical side and the art side would talk and solve problems together. And that's where I met her husband, Larry, because he asked a very kind of negative sounding question, and I fell in love with him. And Larry joined our board, and through Larry being on a board, I got to know Cheryl better than I'd known any other eminent scholar outside of Philip Morseberger. So Cheryl Goslicker, I miss her. They have moved back to Athens, but I do miss her. But I'm so glad that she was here, and she set that tone for our next eminent scholar of really involving the community and not just staying inside the campus walls. Another artist that you may have heard of is Stacy Swider. Stacy also had a career in design. I believe she was designing fabric for years, and then she taught. And then when she retired to become a full-time artist, she had the best balance that I'd seen of an artist who understood the business side as well as the art side. And so Stacy knew that she had to not just produce work, but sell work. And so she worked hard on social media, on e-commerce sites for her website. Last year, right before we went into full pandemic mode, she helped us by teaching the class, The Business of Being an Artist, at the Gertrude Herbert Institute of Art, and she'll be back next year. She has an idea for a next class, and so Stacy is what I consider to be a big thinker, probably right and left brain, and she knows that she has to work on both sides of her craft, the business side and the art side. A lot of times an artist will have someone they hire to do the business side, and Stacy's done a really great job of understanding that and creating the balance for herself. So thank you to Stacy Swider. Lily Morris is another artist. She has just won the award from the Arts Council, the Individual Artist Award. She was an RN for years. I've known her forever as an RN, kind of running into her at events. She also plays music, Irish music, and paints and creates and does collage work. And she's one of the most interesting women as well, and she always kind of blames her RN side for how detailed she is. And I think it's great to meet an artist who's detailed and meets deadlines. Not to make any general statements about artists who don't, but Lily certainly does do that. And so I always look forward to running into her. She's helping us with our June event, a private view, where we have 5 artists represented and a couple talking about collecting art, and Lily helped arrange all of that and find us the musician. So it's great to have another well-rounded artist, female artist in our fold and by our side. I thought I'd just end with a little bit about me, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and why I love artists so much. So growing up, I guess I didn't really understand how to describe what I wanted to be when I grew up, but I knew I wanted it to be something in the arts. Unfortunately, I have no ability to make money from art. I don't draw, sing, even in karaoke, I'm asked not to do that. I did take dance lessons in high school. I could dance, but I was kind of late in the game, and so I'm not a dancer. So, but I knew as I started thinking about careers that I wanted a career where I was surrounded by the arts. Not as a secretary, because I also failed typing twice, but doing something where I was around artists in that life. And by joining the Arts Council, I really found my groove of supporting the arts and loving the arts and bringing the arts in Augusta forward. And so for that, I'm thankful for this opportunity. And you know, a lot of the information I talked about is available. If you start Googling people, you'll find it. And I hope that you do. And I love Augusta. We're a super creative town filled with millions of creative people. And I know you're probably thinking, why didn't you talk about her? And I'm sorry, I was not given 5 hours to talk today. I was just given a limited time. If I left anyone out and you're going to cry on your pillow tonight for that, I'm sorry. But I really wanted to hit the highlights of people I've interacted with and people who have made a difference in the vibrant arts community in Augusta, Georgia. Thank you so much. So I'm allowed to do a commercial break, and I will invite you all to attend a private view. If you go to our website, augustaarts.com, you can register on the website. It's very affordable, and it will be an afternoon at the River Island Community Center, or the clubhouse, from 1:30 to 4 on Sunday, the June 27th. We'll have mimosas, conversation, and some food to eat. And Greg and Trina Smith will be talking about collecting. We have the Henrys will be performing, and it should just be a beautiful indoor-outdoor event with 5 artists selling their work, and just a way of getting together after not getting together for so long, and helping to support some local artists. So thank you very much. It's called A Private View, an afternoon of mimosas, art, and conversation.